folks, Mark here, Lighthouse Law Club and the Monaco Management Group. Wrapping up my final leg of my Eastern European tour here, banking and financial tour. It's been a wonderful time, learned an awful lot, met some wonderful people, and actually have acquired some fantastic tools that we'll be able to use quite successfully. And so it's been very, very successful. I've got one more leg, actually two more legs over the next 3 days, and we'll be wrapping it up, coming home with some really nice goodies. Today I want to talk about the largest and best tax haven in the world. Some of you may be aware of this, many not, and so I thought I would bring it to your attention. And it's funny and it's sad at the same time. The hypocrisy is just beyond belief. But here's the situation, and you may very well be aware of it, but we've got the high tax countries browbeating, bullying, and strong-arming the efficient low-tax countries to change their laws so that the high-tax countries don't have to compete with the more efficient low-tax countries. You know, 20, 30 years ago, we had the little island countries. They don't have much to stand on economically. They don't have big mining industries, manufacturing, or agriculture to, generate foreign capital through exports. So they developed financial industries that were extremely successful in attracting smart, professional, educated people to come and work on the islands or in the countries that they were in, and attract a lot of capital in the process, which was a real boon to the economy. It was about the only thing some of these small countries really had to work with. And so, here we've got the Western industrialized countries charging high taxes, raping their people financially right and left, can't compete with that. They see, all this money going from the high tax countries to the low tax countries, and so rather than try and compete in an open and fair market and perhaps adjust their own policies so they could compete in some way or another, they just went to put the little guys out of business. Kind of like the mafia does, right? Come around, strong arm people, put the competition out of business. And that's essentially what's been happening with the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the financial Gestapo arm of the European Union, and of course the United States. The United States is the biggest bully on the block. Put forward FATCA, the Financial Account Tax Compliance Act, which requires the rest of the world, all the banks and financial institutions in the rest of the world, to report their U.S. citizens and their financial activity. Now you say, well, how could one country force others to do their bidding in the other country? Well, it's quite simple. Most countries and banks, financial institutions that use U.S. dollars, have correspondent banking relationships in New York, San Francisco, or other cities in the U.S., primarily New York, the financial center. And the U.S. basically said that, well, if you want to continue to use these correspondent banks and use the U.S. dollar, you need to comply, or we'll just put a 30% automatic withholding tax on all the funds going through your bank, which of course would have been hugely disastrous. So the big high tax countries are beating up and bullying the smaller countries, and we're at the point now where the old so-called tax havens, Hong Kong, Panama, Seychelles, talking about BVI, talking about the Caribbean countries, large number of Caribbean countries were all known as tax havens, Cook Islands, Vanuatu in the South Pacific, and many others. These were big industries for a while, but the OECD is putting these guys out of business, okay? And the biggest bully, of course, is the USA. They want to track their citizens all over the world. They want to track their financial activity all over the world. They want to monitor. They want to keep their thumb on what's going on. They want to be sure that there's full tax compliance with the high rates of taxes that they're charging. They're not allowing their own people just to go and live somewhere else and be left alone. Americans are taxed on worldwide income. So that's what makes it quite ironic to note. In this conference I was just at in Kiev, Ukraine, last week, the common theme throughout the entire conference was how the old so-called tax havens were no longer able to do their normal business because the OECD countries were not going to allow them to do transactions with the OECD countries. France, UK, Germany. Go right down the list. So Brussels has basically said, if you don't comply with our laws, we're not going to let you do business with us. Now think about it. Isn't this a major step in the direction of the mark of the beast? Or unless you have the mark, unless you have the political seal of approval, unless you are politically correct and we decide we like you, you won't be able to do business. This is the first step in that process, or perhaps several steps into that process, but it's obvious. It's obvious. They're setting the rules and making the situation such that if these little countries want to even survive, they need to submit. So this is what makes it so interesting when we start looking at the USA. The biggest tax haven in the world is the USA. Believe it or not, you may have heard that before. I've known it for some time. In fact, my attorney wrote a book on the subject years ago. But it's the biggest and most useful tax haven in the world for who? Not Americans, foreigners. Foreigners. It came as no surprise that there was a U.S. bank at this conference in Ukraine promoting its services to foreigners. So here are just some excerpts out of the presentation that they had. Foreigners can easily set up accounts in U.S. banks, and if it's not an interest-bearing account, nothing is reported. The U.S. wants all the countries in the world to report on its citizens, but they won't report one iota on citizens from other countries. If you come in and set up a corporate account, the U.S. bank in most cases doesn't even care who is the ultimate beneficial owner, the UBO. Now that's mandatory around the world. You can put companies who own other companies, who own a trust, who own an LLC, long chain of companies, one owning the other, to hide ownership. But ultimately now the banks want to know who is the person behind the whole scheme. Who is the ultimate beneficial owner? The U.S., they don't care. The U.S. says, bring your money into us. We don't care who you are. We don't want to know who you are. Just bring your money to us. So, if that isn't the epitome of hypocrisy, then I don't know what is. So, be aware of that. The point is, this can be taken advantage of, this can be utilized, whether you're a foreigner or a U.S. person, most commonly used. You can benefit. There are ways to structure to have what appears to be stability, if such a thing exists, in U.S. banking. Relatively speaking to the rest of the world, it's quite attractive for a lot of people to have U.S. banking and have all the benefits of a Caribbean island tax-free nation and be able to do business with the rest of the world. Look up the Financial Secrecy Index 2019. You'll see USA competing with Switzerland to be the top privacy jurisdiction for foreigners. Secrecy, they even call it. Privacy is one thing. Secrecy takes it to the next level. The USA is listed with Switzerland as the top secrecy jurisdiction in the world for banking. So be aware of that. That might factor into some of your plans, perhaps. That's already factored into our plans, what we do with the Monaco Management Group, and how things are set up, utilized, taken advantage of. Obviously always fully compliant with the law, and doing our part to uphold the law as best we can. All right, so that's it for now. I'll hopefully be talking to you soon with a little bit of a wrap up on some things that might be of interest as this tour concludes. I might just add that it's very refreshing in Eastern Europe because they've been oppressed for a long time, very oppressed. I went through the museum, the historical museum in the Republic of Georgia, and there's a big section there reflecting what was actually going on during the Soviet occupation. Georgia used to be part of the Soviet Union, and highly oppressive. They gained their freedom in 1991 after 70 years of Soviet domination, and that's just like yesterday, on the historical time chart. So they have a hunger and a desire to do business, to grow, as opposed to many other countries which are pretty satisfied where they're at. They don't care, they don't give a crap, and don't bother me. They're not that hungry. But you see these emerging countries coming out, they're hungry for business. Sitting in a meeting with the managers of the wealth management division of a large bank here. And they were excited to be dealing with an American. They were excited to be looking at the potential of a business that could be brought and generated, not only from their local jurisdiction, their local market, but really from the USA. So there still are a lot of opportunities for Americans and people all over the world. If you're from the UK, Australia, these are things to know about, be aware of, and take advantage of. So we're here doing the groundwork, doing the legwork for you, gathering the info, making the contacts, putting forth the arrangements, and hopefully at some point you can take advantage of it, a ready-made situation that can help advance your freedom quotient and protect and preserve your finances in the best way possible. So that's it from now. Signing off. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for your attention. Take care and God bless.